Our first story plunges into the chilling and inexplicable disappearance of Elisa Lam, whose mysterious fate has left investigators and the public searching for answers to this day. Elisa Lam was a 21-year-old college student from Vancouver, Canada, pursuing a degree in psychology at the University of British Columbia. Known for her creativity and friendly demeanor, Elisa also struggled with mental health issues, including bipolar disorder and depression. Despite these challenges, she was adventurous and curious about the world. In January 2013, Elisa decided to take a solo trip to California as a break from her studies. Her goal was to explore the West Coast, documenting her travels on social media through thoughtful posts and photos. Elisa's journey began smoothly as she made her way through San Diego, visiting the zoo and various tourist spots. Her trip appeared uneventful until she arrived in Los Angeles, where she checked into the Cecil Hotel. Located near Skid Row, the Cecil had a dark and infamous history. Over the decades, it had been home to numerous suicides, murders, and even housed serial killers, such as Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. Despite its affordable rates, the hotel's sinister reputation made it a questionable choice for travelers. Elisa, however, seemed unaware of its history. For the first few days, Elisa kept in touch with her family, calling them daily to update them on her adventures. However, on January 31, 2013, her parents became alarmed when Elisa failed to check in. This was highly unusual for her, and they immediately reported her missing to the Los Angeles Police Department. Investigators began searching the area and interviewing staff and guests at the Cecil Hotel. Flyers with Elisa's photo were distributed throughout the city, but no solid leads emerged in the days following her disappearance. Things took a dark turn when the hotel released surveillance footage from one of its elevators. The 4-minute video, which quickly went viral online, showed Elisa behaving in a bizarre and erratic manner. In the footage, she enters the elevator and presses multiple buttons, but the elevator doors remain open. She peeks out into the hallway, steps back inside, and then hides in a corner. At one point, Elisa appears to gesture and talk to someone who isn't visible in the frame. Her movements are unnatural, almost as if she is disoriented or interacting with an unseen force. The video sparked widespread speculation, with theories ranging from a mental health episode to the involvement of supernatural entities. As days turned into weeks, the search for Elisa intensified. Police combed through the hotel, using sniffer dogs to search every floor, but they found no trace of her. Meanwhile, guests at the Cecil began complaining about low water pressure, a strange taste in the tap water, and a foul odor. On February 19, 2013, a maintenance worker was sent to the roof to check the hotel's water tanks. Inside one of the tanks, he made a horrifying discovery. Elisa's body was floating in the water. The discovery of Elisa's body only deepened the mystery. How did she end up in the water tank? The tank's entrance was a heavy metal lid that required significant effort to open. Furthermore, accessing the roof itself was challenging, involving locked doors and alarms that were supposedly intact when police investigated. Elisa was found naked, with her clothes and belongings floating nearby. An autopsy report ruled her death accidental, attributing it to drowning, and noted that there was no evidence of trauma or foul play. Toxicology tests revealed trace amounts of prescription medications, consistent with her bipolar disorder treatment, but no recreational drugs or alcohol were detected. Despite the official ruling, many unanswered questions lingered. If her death was accidental, how did she bypass the security measures to reach the roof? Why did she remove her clothes before entering the tank? And what about her strange behavior in the elevator footage? These questions fueled countless theories online. Some suggested that Elisa was experiencing a manic episode due to her bipolar disorder, which could explain her erratic behavior and decision to climb into the tank. Others believed she was murdered, pointing to the hotel's history of crime and its proximity to Skid Row. One of the most chilling theories involves the paranormal. Given the Cecil Hotel's notorious reputation, some speculate that Elisa was influenced by supernatural forces. The elevator footage, in particular, has been cited as evidence of a ghostly presence. Others have drawn connections between Elisa's case and the plot of the 2005 Japanese horror film Dark Water, which features a young girl's body being discovered in a water tank atop an apartment building. The case has also raised broader questions about mental health and the risks faced by individuals traveling alone. Elisa's struggles with bipolar disorder were well documented, and her family later revealed that she had experienced psychotic episodes in the past. However, this explanation has done little to satisfy those who see her death as more than a tragic accident. To this day, the mystery of Elisa Lam continues to captivate and disturb. The Cecil Hotel, now rebranded as Stay on Main, remains a source of morbid fascination for true crime enthusiasts and paranormal investigators alike. Elisa's story serves as a haunting reminder of how quickly an ordinary trip can take a dark and inexplicable turn. Our next story takes us deep into the eerie countryside of Germany in 1922, where an entire family met a gruesome fate, leaving behind a chilling and unresolved mystery. Hinterkaifeck was a small, isolated farmstead in Bavaria, Germany, inhabited by the Gruber family. The family consisted of Andreas Gruber, the patriarch, his wife, Cecilia, their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, and Victoria's two young children, Cecilia and Joseph. Despite their modest life, the family had a complicated and troubling history. It was rumored that Andreas and Victoria had an incestuous relationship, a scandal that cast a dark shadow over the household. In the months leading up to the murders, the family began noticing strange occurrences. Andreas reported finding footprints in the snow leading from the forest to the farm but not away from it. He also heard disembodied footsteps in the attic and discovered unfamiliar newspapers in the house. Tools went missing, and an unexplained set of keys appeared. Despite these unsettling signs, Andreas refused to leave the farm or report the incidents to the authorities. On March 31, 1922, neighbors became concerned when the family failed to attend church, a highly unusual absence. 2 days later, locals decided to investigate. Upon entering the property, they were met with a horrifying scene. In the barn, the bodies of Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and young Cecilia were discovered stacked and covered with hay. Inside the house, the remains of Joseph and the family maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had only begun working at the farm the day before, were found. All had been brutally murdered with a mattock, a farming tool used for chopping. The murder weapon was missing, and the crime scene left investigators baffled. The killer had lured the victims into the barn one by one before killing them with a precise, devastating blow to the head. Young Cecilia, however, appeared to have survived for several hours after the attack, as clumps of her hair were found clutched in her hands, possibly pulled out in agony. Strangely, the killer remained at the farm for days after the murders. Neighbors reported seeing smoke from the chimney and noted that the livestock had been fed. Food was missing from the pantry, and the house was generally tidy, indicating that the murderer was calm and deliberate. Yet, there was no apparent motive, no significant money was stolen, and there were no signs of a struggle. This level of composure deeply unsettled investigators and the community. Police launched an extensive investigation, interviewing hundreds of suspects, including disgruntled workers, estranged family members, and even Victoria's rumored lover. Several leads were pursued, including a theory that Joseph, the youngest child, was fathered by Victoria's abusive father, Andreas. This, some speculated, could have sparked a violent confrontation. However, nothing conclusive ever emerged. Over the years, numerous theories have circulated. Some believe the murders were the work of a transient or drifter who stumbled upon the isolated farm. Others suggest a deeply personal vendetta, given the brutal and targeted nature of the attacks. There are even those who speculate supernatural involvement, pointing to the family's reports of ghostly noises in the days leading up to the murders. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of the most perplexing and chilling unsolved crimes in German history. The farm was eventually demolished in 1923, but the case has endured, captivating true crime enthusiasts and paranormal investigators alike. The thought of an unknown figure stalking and slaughtering a family, then calmly living among their corpses, is a nightmare that continues to haunt the imagination. In 1918 and 1919, a shadowy figure known only as the Axeman prowled the streets of New Orleans, leaving behind a legacy of fear and unanswered questions. The Axeman first struck on May 23, 1918, targeting Joseph and Catherine Maggio, owners of a small grocery store. The killer broke into their home late at night, attacking them with an axe taken from their own property. Joseph's throat was slit so deeply that his head was nearly severed, while Catherine's skull was shattered. The crime scene was gruesome and chaotic, yet no clear motive or evidence emerged. Over the next year, the Axeman continued his spree, attacking several other Italian-American grocers. His modus operandi was chillingly consistent. He would chisel out a panel of the victim's door to gain entry, use their own axe or razor to kill, and then vanish into the night. Some victims survived the attacks, but none could identify the perpetrator. The killer's actions terrorized the city, but it was his letter to the press in March 1919 that cemented his infamy. In the letter, the Axeman claimed to be a demon from hell and threatened to strike again on a specific night. However, he stated he would spare anyone who played jazz music, describing himself as a lover of the genre. That night, the city was alive with jazz, with bands performing in homes, bars, and even on the streets. True to his word, no murders occurred. Despite widespread fear, the Axeman was never caught. His attacks abruptly stopped in October 1919, leaving investigators with no clues and a community grappling with the horror of his crimes. Theories about his identity have ranged from him being a mafia enforcer targeting Italians, to a deranged maniac, or even a supernatural entity. However, none of these theories have been proven, and the Axeman of New Orleans remains a ghostly figure in the annals of true crime history. Our next story takes us to the snowy wilderness of Russia in 1959, where 9 hikers met a mysterious and horrifying fate, leaving behind one of the most perplexing unsolved cases in modern history. The Dyatlov Pass Incident centers around a group of 9 experienced hikers led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student. The group set off on January 23, 1959, aiming to reach the peak of Mount Otorten in the northern Ural Mountains. These were seasoned outdoorsmen, accustomed to harsh weather and grueling conditions. However, what awaited them in the frozen wilderness was something far beyond their preparation or understanding. The trip proceeded normally at first. The group kept meticulous journals and took photographs, capturing their camaraderie and the breathtaking scenery. On January 31st, they reached the edge of a pass that would later bear Dyatlov's name. They decided to camp on the slope of Kholat Syakhl, which translates to Dead Mountain in the indigenous Monsey language, a chilling foreshadowing of what was to come. When the group failed to return as scheduled, search parties were dispatched. On February 26th, rescuers discovered their abandoned campsite. The scene was both puzzling and deeply unsettling. The hikers' tent had been slashed open from the inside, and their belongings were left behind, including warm clothing and shoes, an inexplicable choice given the freezing conditions. Footprints led away from the tent, but they were made by bare or socked feet, suggesting a hasty and panicked escape. As rescuers followed the trail, they began to uncover the bodies. The first 2 were found at the edge of the nearby forest, near a makeshift fire. Both were dressed only in their underclothes, their bodies showing signs of hypothermia. A third body, that of Igor Dyatlov, was discovered a short distance away, positioned as if he had been attempting to return to the tent. The remaining bodies were not found until 2 months later, buried under several feet of snow in a ravine. These corpses presented even more baffling injuries. One woman's chest had been crushed with a force likened to a car accident, and another man's skull was fractured. Most chillingly, one hiker was missing their eyes, and another their tongue. Yet, there were no external wounds or signs of struggle on the surface of their bodies. The official investigation offered little clarity. Soviet authorities ruled that the group had died due to a compelling natural force, a vague and unsatisfying explanation. Theories began to emerge, each more unsettling than the last. Some suggested an avalanche had forced the hikers to flee their tent in a panic, but this didn't explain the bizarre injuries or the absence of avalanche evidence. Others speculated that the group had encountered a wild animal, yet no tracks or signs of a struggle were found. More sinister theories began to take shape. Some pointed to secret Soviet military experiments, citing reports of strange lights in the sky and high levels of radiation on some of the clothing. This theory gained traction when it was revealed that the area was used for missile testing. However, there was no conclusive evidence to link the hikers' deaths to a military operation. Another popular explanation delves into the paranormal. Some believe the group fell victim to a yeti or other cryptid, while others suggest they encountered extraterrestrial beings. The strange lights in the sky, combined with the unusual injuries, have fueled these speculations for decades. Still, no definitive evidence supports such claims. The indigenous Monsey people, who live in the region, were initially suspected but later cleared of any involvement. The area was considered sacred to the Monsey, leading to speculation about a curse or spiritual retribution. Yet, the Monsi themselves dismissed these ideas, expressing sorrow over the tragedy. In recent years, researchers have revisited the Dyatlov Pass incident with advanced forensic techniques. A 2021 study proposed that a rare type of slab avalanche could have explained the group's flight from the tent and some of their injuries. This hypothesis suggests that a slow-moving block of snow crushed the tent, causing the hikers to panic and flee. However, even this explanation doesn't account for all the strange details, such as the missing eyes and tongue, or why the group would have chosen to camp on an exposed slope in the first place. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of the most enduring mysteries in true crime and the paranormal world. The area itself has become a site of pilgrimage for adventurers and conspiracy theorists alike, its haunting landscape a silent witness to a tragedy that defies explanation. Even today, over 6 decades later, the question lingers: what truly happened on that cold, desolate mountain? Were the hikers victims of natural forces, human malevolence, or something far more unexplainable? Whatever the answer, their story serves as a chilling reminder of how little we truly understand about the forces of nature and the unknown. This next story delves into the tragic and haunting case of JonBenét Ramsey, a young girl whose brutal death became one of the most infamous and enduring mysteries in modern crime history. On Christmas night, 1996, the Ramsey family seemed to be living the perfect holiday. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey, a 6-year-old beauty pageant star, had spent the day celebrating with her parents, John and Patsy, and her older brother, Burke, in their luxurious Boulder, Colorado home. Their affluent lifestyle and picturesque family image painted a picture of domestic bliss. However, by the early hours of December 26th, their lives would be shattered by an act of unspeakable horror. That morning, Patsy Ramsey woke up early and went downstairs. On the staircase, she discovered a 3-page handwritten ransom note demanding $118,000 for the return of her daughter. The note was strangely specific, mentioning an amount that matched the exact bonus John Ramsey had recently received at work. Frantic, Patsy immediately called 911, reporting that JonBenét was missing and that they had received a ransom note. Despite being told to keep the house secure for the investigation, friends and family were called over, inadvertently contaminating the crime scene. As police searched the home, they found no signs of forced entry or a struggle. Hours later, a devastating discovery was made. John Ramsey, accompanied by a friend, ventured into the basement and found JonBenét's lifeless body. She was wrapped in a white blanket, with a garrote fashioned from a cord and one of Patsy's paintbrushes tied around her neck. There was also evidence of blunt force trauma to her skull. Disturbingly, traces of undigested pineapple were found in her stomach, yet the family denied feeding her that night. The crime scene itself was puzzling. The ransom note, written on paper from inside the Ramsey home, raised immediate suspicion. Why would a kidnapper pen a lengthy note in the house rather than bringing one with them? Furthermore, why was JonBenét's body still in the house if the intent was ransom? These inconsistencies cast doubt on the possibility of an outside intruder. The investigation quickly became mired in controversy. The media frenzy surrounding the case turned the Ramseys into suspects in the court of public opinion. Patsy, in particular, came under scrutiny for her seemingly composed demeanor during interviews, which some interpreted as cold or rehearsed. Speculation swirled about whether JonBenét's death was the result of an accidental injury covered up by her parents, or even Burke, who was just 9 years old at the time. However, another theory emerged, that an intruder had broken into the house and killed JonBenét. A basement window was found slightly ajar, and an unidentified boot print was discovered nearby. Advocates of the intruder theory also pointed to DNA evidence found on JonBenét's underwear that did not match any family member. This DNA, however, was inconclusive and could have been the result of secondary transfer. The bizarre nature of the ransom note has fueled endless speculation. Written in a faux dramatic tone, it referenced foreign factions and demanded a specific sum of money that seemed oddly personal. Handwriting analysis yielded inconclusive results, with experts divided on whether Patsy had written it. Some argued that the language and phrasing were consistent with someone trying to mimic a kidnapping scenario. As the case dragged on, the Ramseys faced a relentless media storm. Conspiracy theories proliferated, ranging from accusations of child exploitation to claims of involvement in a sinister cover-up. The family steadfastly maintained their innocence, and no charges were ever filed against them. Years later, advancements in DNA testing revealed a partial profile of an unknown male on JonBenét's clothing. This discovery shifted some suspicion away from the family, but the results were not definitive enough to identify a suspect. The Boulder Police Department faced criticism for mishandling the investigation, with key evidence compromised and critical leads overlooked in the chaotic early days of the case. Despite numerous investigations, documentaries, and even grand jury deliberations, the case remains unsolved. In 1999, a grand jury voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey for child endangerment and obstruction of a murder investigation, but the district attorney declined to prosecute, citing insufficient evidence. Over the years, JonBenét's story has become a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of innocence lost and justice delayed. True crime enthusiasts and experts alike continue to analyze every detail, from the garrote to the pineapple, in search of an answer. Books, documentaries, and podcasts have dissected the case, but every theory only seems to deepen the mystery. JonBenét Ramsey's murder is a chilling reminder of how a single act of violence can destroy lives and leave an indelible mark on the world. More than 2 decades later, her case stands as one of the most perplexing and haunting crimes of the modern era. To this day, the question lingers: was it a tragic accident, a family secret, or the work of a cold-blooded intruder? Whatever the truth, JonBenét's bright smile and untimely death remain etched in the collective memory, a poignant reminder of a life stolen too soon. Our next story takes us to the quiet town of Villisca, Iowa, in 1912, where a horrific crime left 8 people dead and a community haunted by fear and speculation for over a century. On the morning of June 10, 1912, the small town of Villisca awoke to a nightmare. The Moore family, Josiah, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, along with 2 young houseguests, Lena and Ina Stillinger, were found brutally murdered in their home. The discovery was made by a concerned neighbor who noticed the family hadn't come out to complete their morning chores. The scene inside the Moore residence was horrifying. All 8 victims had been killed with an axe, their skulls smashed in as they slept. The murder weapon, Josiah's own axe, was found left behind, leaning against a wall. The killer had covered the victims' faces with cloth or blankets after the murders, and all the mirrors in the house were draped with clothing. A lamp with the chimney removed was left burning dimly, casting eerie shadows throughout the home. The details of the crime puzzled investigators. There was no sign of forced entry, suggesting the killer had slipped into the house unnoticed, possibly while the family was still awake. Some theorized that the killer hid in the attic, as undisturbed cigarette butts were found there, indicating someone had been waiting for hours. After the murders, the killer lingered in the house, leaving strange clues: a plate of uneaten food on the kitchen table and a bowl of bloody water where they had cleaned their hands. The brutality of the attack was staggering. Josiah Moore, in particular, was targeted with extreme violence. His face was nearly unrecognizable, having been struck repeatedly with the blunt end of the axe. This led some to believe the killer had a personal vendetta against him, though no evidence supported this theory. The investigation attracted national attention, but it quickly became a circus of accusations, theories, and sensationalism. Law enforcement officials, unable to secure the crime scene properly, allowed townspeople to wander through the house, contaminating evidence. Reporters and curious onlookers swarmed Villisca, further complicating efforts to solve the crime. Several suspects emerged over the years, but none were definitively linked to the murders. One of the first was Reverend George Kelly, a traveling preacher with a history of mental illness. Kelly had been in Villisca the night of the murders and exhibited strange behavior afterward, writing letters to the police and the victims' families describing details of the crime. He even confessed to the murders at one point but later recanted. Kelly was tried twice, once resulting in a hung jury and once in acquittal. Another suspect was Frank Jones, a prominent local businessman who had a falling out with Josiah Moore years earlier. Some believe Jones hired a hitman, William Blackie Mansfield, to kill the Moore family. Mansfield had a violent history and was suspected in several other axe murders, but no solid evidence connected him to Villisca. A series of similar axe murders across the Midwest in the years surrounding the Villisca crime led to speculation about a wandering serial killer. In each case, the perpetrator entered the home at night, used an axe found at the scene, and left behind strange, ritualistic details, such as covering mirrors or leaving a lamp burning. The idea of a traveling axeman gained traction, but no conclusive proof tied the crimes together. The psychological impact on the Villisca community was profound. Doors that had once been left unlocked were now bolted tight. Families installed new locks and weapons, fearful that the killer might strike again. Town gossip was relentless, with neighbors accusing one another of harboring dark secrets. The case became a grim legend, with whispered tales of curses and supernatural forces adding to the fear. In the years since, the Villisca Axe Murders have remained unsolved. The Moore house still stands, preserved as a museum and a site for paranormal investigations. Visitors often report strange occurrences, such as disembodied voices, shadowy figures, and objects moving on their own. Some believe the spirits of the victims remain trapped there, seeking justice that has eluded them for over a century. Despite modern forensic advancements and countless theories, the Villisca Axe murders continue to confound investigators and true crime enthusiasts alike. Was it a personal vendetta, a random act of violence, or the work of a deranged serial killer? The lack of definitive answers only deepens the chilling aura surrounding the case. To this day, the shadow of that horrific June night lingers over Villisca, a haunting reminder of the fragility of safety and the terrifying unknown. The Moore family and the Stillinger sisters remain silent witnesses to their own tragedy, their voices lost to time but their story etched into the annals of American crime history. This story explores the terrifying and cryptic case of the Zodiac Killer, a shadowy figure who taunted police and the public while leaving behind a trail of death and mystery. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, a killer who called himself the Zodiac unleashed a reign of terror in Northern California. Unlike many criminals who sought to evade detection, the Zodiac relished the spotlight, sending taunting letters, ciphers, and riddles to local newspapers, daring the authorities to catch him. Despite his brazen behavior and the massive investigative efforts that followed, the Zodiac Killer was never identified, cementing his place as one of the most infamous figures in true crime history. The Zodiac's confirmed killing spree began on December 20, 1968, when high school sweethearts Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday were shot to death on a remote road in Benicia, California. The scene was chilling. Betty Lou was found outside the car, riddled with bullets, while David lay slumped near the vehicle. There were no witnesses, and the motive appeared unclear. 7 months later, the killer struck again. On July 4, 1969, Dolene Ferrin and Mike Mago were parked at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo when a car pulled up beside them. A man exited and began firing into their vehicle. Dolene was killed instantly, while Mike survived, despite multiple gunshot wounds. He described the assailant as a heavy-set white man, but the description was too vague to lead to an arrest. The Zodiac officially introduced himself on August 1, 1969, when 3 newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, received identical handwritten letters. In them, the killer took credit for the murders and included a cryptogram, claiming it would reveal his identity. He demanded the newspapers publish the ciphers on their front pages, threatening to kill again if they refused. The press complied, and amateur cryptographers worked feverishly to decode the messages. One of the ciphers, known as the 408 cipher, was cracked by a couple from Salinas, California. It revealed a chilling message: "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." However, the message gave no clues to the killer's identity, as he had promised. The Zodiac struck again on September 27, 1969, targeting Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard at Lake Berryessa. The couple was enjoying a peaceful day by the water when a man wearing a hooded costume emblazoned with a crosshair symbol approached them. He claimed to be an escaped convict and demanded money and their car keys. Then, he tied them up and stabbed them repeatedly. Cecilia died from her wounds, but Brian survived and provided a description of the attacker's voice and demeanor. The Zodiac later called the police to confess, once again taunting investigators. 2 weeks later, on October 11, 1969, San Francisco cab driver Paul Stein was shot in the head in the upscale Presidio Heights neighborhood. Unlike the Zodiac's previous crimes, this attack appeared random and lacked the secluded, romantic setting of his earlier murders. Witnesses saw the killer calmly walking away from the scene, yet police failed to apprehend him. The Zodiac continued his spree of terror through letters. He claimed responsibility for 37 murders, though only 5 have been officially confirmed. His letters were filled with cryptic clues, including a cipher known as the Z340, which went unsolved for over 50 years. In December 2020, a team of amateur codebreakers finally cracked it. The decoded message reiterated the Zodiac's thrill for killing and his disdain for law enforcement, but it revealed nothing about his identity. Theories about the Zodiac's identity abound. Suspects have ranged from local eccentrics to notorious criminals, but none have been definitively linked to the case. One of the most infamous suspects was Arthur Lee Allen, a Vallejo resident with a history of violence and disturbing behavior. Investigators found circumstantial evidence connecting Allen to the Zodiac, including possession of a watch with the Zodiac symbol and suspicious statements he made to friends. However, DNA tests and handwriting analysis failed to conclusively tie him to the crimes. The Zodiac's ability to evade capture, despite his taunts and apparent desire for recognition, has puzzled law enforcement and the public for decades. Some speculate he had insider knowledge of police procedures, while others believe he was simply lucky or stopped killing altogether. Theories range from him being an ordinary citizen blending into society to a highly intelligent psychopath who meticulously planned every move. The Zodiac Killer case has left a profound impact on popular culture, inspiring countless books, films, and documentaries. His cryptic messages, eerie costume, and audacious correspondence continue to fascinate true crime enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists alike. To this day, the Zodiac's true identity remains a mystery, and his ciphers, including one yet to be fully solved, continue to tantalize codebreakers. The case serves as a chilling reminder of how one person can spread fear and chaos, defying capture and justice. The Zodiac's parting words in one of his letters still haunt investigators: "I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner." Our next story unravels the perplexing disappearance of Maura Murray, a young woman whose vanishing in 2004 has become one of the most haunting and debated mysteries in true crime history. Maura Murray was a 21-year-old nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She was intelligent, athletic, and driven, but in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, cracks began to appear in her seemingly stable life. On February 9, 2004, Maura packed her car with clothing, toiletries, and textbooks and emailed her professors, claiming she needed to leave due to a family emergency. There was no such emergency, and what followed has baffled investigators and her loved ones ever since. That afternoon, Maura left campus and drove into the snowy mountains of New Hampshire. Around 7:30 p.m., her black satin car skidded off Route 112 near the small town of Woodsville. A local school bus driver, Butch Atwood, happened upon the scene and offered assistance. He described Maura as calm and polite, declining his help and saying she had already called for a tow truck. But no call had been made. Atwood drove away, but not before noticing Maura's car hazard lights were on, her rear window cracked, and her movements deliberate. By the time law enforcement arrived 10 minutes later, Maura was gone. Her car remained on the side of the road, doors locked, and her belongings largely intact, though her wallet and phone were missing. Inside the vehicle were items suggesting she had planned for a trip: alcohol, a book about mountain climbing, and printed directions to accommodations in Vermont. However, no footprints led away from the vehicle, and there were no signs of a struggle. The investigation into Maura's disappearance unearthed a series of enigmatic clues but no definitive answers. Her family and friends described her as private and independent but noted she had been under considerable stress. Days before her disappearance, Maura had crashed her father's car, causing significant damage. Adding to this, she had recently been caught using a stolen credit card to buy food. While these incidents seemed minor, some speculated that Maura was overwhelmed and wanted to escape her life for a while. Search efforts were extensive, with police, volunteers, and K-9 units combing the woods and surrounding areas for weeks. Helicopters equipped with infrared cameras searched from above, but no trace of Maura was found. Investigators initially theorized that she had wandered into the woods and succumbed to the elements, but no body or clothing fragments ever surfaced. The lack of evidence fueled speculation that Maura had been abducted. Maura's case took a darker turn as theories about foul play emerged. Her remote location and the timing of her disappearance led some to believe that she had been picked up by a passerby, possibly someone with sinister intentions. Others pointed to rumors of a troubled relationship with her boyfriend, Bill Roche, who was stationed at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. Phone records revealed that Bill had left multiple voicemails for Maura in the days before her disappearance, and his behavior during the search, reportedly obsessive and controlling, raised suspicions among some investigators. Another theory posits that Maura deliberately staged her disappearance. Her actions in the days leading up to February 9th, including withdrawing nearly all the money from her bank account and packing her car with travel essentials, suggest she may have been planning to leave her current life behind. Some believe Maura successfully started anew under a different identity, though this would require extraordinary planning and the absence of digital or financial traces. The case became even more mysterious with later developments. Over the years, several unverified sightings of Maura were reported, from southern New Hampshire to Canada. None of these sightings were confirmed, but they kept hope alive for her family and supporters. In 2011, a bone fragment was discovered near where she vanished, but it did not match Maura's DNA. In 2019, a basement near the crash site was excavated based on a tip, but no remains were found. One of the most unsettling aspects of Maura's disappearance is the timeline. Multiple witnesses saw her in the moments after her crash, and she disappeared in a narrow window of time before police arrived. Despite this, no one reported seeing her leave the scene or being picked up by another vehicle. This tight timeline has led to endless debates about whether Maura's vanishing was the result of premeditation, chance, or something far more sinister. The disappearance of Maura Murray has captured the imagination of true crime enthusiasts and amateur sleuths worldwide. It has inspired books, documentaries, and podcasts, each exploring new theories and potential evidence. Yet, for all the attention and investigation, her fate remains an enigma. Maura's family continues to search for answers, refusing to give up hope that one day the truth will emerge. Her case serves as a chilling reminder of how quickly a life can vanish, leaving behind only questions, theories, and the haunting absence of closure. Our next story is one of murder, injustice, and redemption, centering on the tragic deaths of 3 young boys in West Memphis, Arkansas, in 1993, and the shocking aftermath that followed. On May 5, 1993, in the quiet town of West Memphis, 3 8-year-old boys, Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Bias, vanished while riding their bikes near a wooded area known as Robin Hood Hills. The following day, their lifeless bodies were discovered in a drainage ditch. The scene was deeply disturbing. The boys were found naked, with their wrists and ankles tied with their own shoelaces. Christopher Bias had suffered additional injuries, including mutilation, which fueled speculation of a ritualistic killing. The gruesome nature of the crime sent shockwaves through the community, and public outcry for justice was swift. However, in the absence of physical evidence, the investigation took a dark turn. Law enforcement, under pressure to solve the case, began to focus on 3 local teenagers, Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly. The trio were outcasts in their community. Eccles, in particular, stood out for his interest in heavy metal music, dark clothing, and occult symbols, leading to rumors that the murders were part of a satanic ritual. Jesse Miskelly, a 17-year-old with a reported IQ of 72, was the first to be interrogated. After hours of aggressive questioning, he gave a confession implicating himself, Eccles, and Baldwin in the murders. However, his confession was riddled with inconsistencies and contradicted known facts about the case, such as the time and manner of the boys' deaths. Miskelly later recanted, claiming he had been coerced, but the damage was done. His confession became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. The trial of the West Memphis 3 began in 1994, and it quickly devolved into a spectacle. The prosecution leaned heavily on the theory of a satanic ritual, citing Eccles' interest in occult topics as evidence of his guilt. A dubious expert on satanic practices was brought in to testify, and rumors of dark rituals were presented as fact. The defense, meanwhile, struggled to counter the prejudices of the jury and the sensationalized media coverage. Despite the lack of physical evidence tying any of the 3 teenagers to the crime, all were convicted. Jesse Miskelly was sentenced to life in prison, while Jason Baldwin received life without parole. Damian Eccles, considered the ringleader, was sentenced to death. The verdict sparked outrage among those who saw the case as a modern-day witch hunt, driven more by fear and prejudice than by facts. Over the years, the case of the West Memphis 3 attracted significant attention from journalists, filmmakers, and advocates for justice. The 1996 HBO documentary Paradise Lost: The Child Murders at Robin Hood Hills exposed the flaws in the investigation and prosecution, galvanizing public support for the trio. Celebrities like Eddie Vedder, Johnny Depp, and Peter Jackson lent their voices and resources to the campaign for their release. In 2007, new DNA testing revealed no traces of Eccles, Baldwin, or Miskelly at the crime scene. Instead, DNA from an unknown male was found on the ligatures used to bind the boys. This evidence, coupled with growing doubts about the validity of Miskelly's confession, led to renewed calls for a retrial. In 2011, after nearly 2 decades in prison, the West Memphis 3 were offered an Alford plea, which allowed them to maintain their innocence while acknowledging that the prosecution had enough evidence to convict them. Faced with the possibility of spending more years in prison, they accepted the deal and were released. The case remains controversial, with no one else ever charged for the murders. Some investigators believe that Terry Hobbs, the stepfather of Stevie Branch, may hold the key to solving the case. Hobbs' DNA was found at the crime scene, and witnesses have come forward with accounts that raise questions about his behavior on the night of the murders. However, Hobbs has denied any involvement, and the case officially remains unsolved. The West Memphis 3 case highlights the dangers of moral panic and the devastating consequences of a flawed justice system. Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly lost 18 years of their lives to wrongful imprisonment, and the families of Stevie, Michael, and Christopher are still waiting for answers about what happened on that terrible night. Today, the West Memphis 3 advocate for criminal justice reform and the importance of due process. Their story is a chilling reminder of how fear, prejudice, and flawed investigations can destroy lives and obscure the truth. The woods of Robin Hood Hills may be quiet now, but the echoes of injustice linger, haunting those who seek resolution and peace. Our final story takes us to Valdosta, Georgia, where the tragic and controversial death of Kendrick Johnson left a family searching for answers and a nation questioning the system. On January 11, 2013, Kendrick Johnson, a 17-year-old high school student and athlete, was found dead in his school's gymnasium. His body was discovered inside a rolled-up wrestling mat, positioned vertically against the wall. Kendrick's legs were sticking out of the top, and his sneakers were at the bottom of the mat. The official explanation for his death was that Kendrick had climbed into the mat to retrieve a shoe, became stuck, and suffocated. However, this conclusion left many questioning the circumstances and the investigation itself. Kendrick's family immediately expressed doubts about the accidental death ruling. They argued that Kendrick was too large to fit into the mat in the manner described and that he wouldn't have attempted to retrieve a shoe that way. The autopsy report listed positional asphyxia as the cause of death, but photos of Kendrick's body, released later, showed significant bruising and swelling, suggesting a more violent end. Disturbingly, his face was so swollen and disfigured that it was almost unrecognizable. The Johnson family fought tirelessly to have Kendrick's case reopened. They raised funds to have his body exhumed and a second autopsy performed. This independent autopsy revealed blunt force trauma to Kendrick's neck, which was inconsistent with the accidental death ruling. The findings fueled speculation that Kendrick had been the victim of foul play, and allegations of a cover-up began to surface. Adding to the controversy was the handling of evidence. Key surveillance footage from the gym was incomplete, with hours of potential evidence missing or corrupted. The mat where Kendrick's body was found had been moved before investigators documented the scene. Blood was also found near the mat, yet it was determined not to be Kendrick's, and no further testing or investigation into its origin was conducted. Rumors and theories about Kendrick's death began to circulate. Some speculated that Kendrick had been murdered during an altercation with another student and that influential families in the community may have played a role in covering up the truth. One theory suggested that Kendrick had been targeted by two brothers, sons of a prominent FBI agent, over a personal dispute. These accusations were strongly denied, and no evidence has ever conclusively tied anyone to Kendrick's death. In 2015, the Johnson family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against local officials, alleging negligence and a conspiracy to hide the true cause of their son's death. The lawsuit named 38 defendants, including law enforcement officers, school officials, and others. However, the case was later dismissed due to lack of evidence. Despite these setbacks, Kendrick's parents have continued their fight for justice, calling for federal investigations and greater transparency. In 2021, the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office reopened the case, citing new evidence. While this brought hope to the Johnson family and their supporters, the investigation remains ongoing, and no significant developments have been announced. Kendrick Johnson's death is a stark reminder of the disparities and mistrust that can exist between communities and law enforcement. For many, his case symbolizes the need for systemic reform and the importance of accountability in the justice system. For Kendrick's family, the search for answers is a deeply personal mission, one they vow to pursue until the truth is revealed. Thank you for joining me on this journey through some of the most chilling and haunting true crime stories. These tales remind us not only of the darkness that exists in the world but also of the resilience of those who seek justice. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more stories like these, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts or cases you'd like me to cover next. Your support helps keep this channel alive, and I can't wait to bring you more compelling content. Until next time, stay safe and take care.